Hello, everybody. Please forgive the slightly disheveled appearance. I am somewhat of a hot mess at the moment, as I've been currently working in the garden for the last 45 minutes, and it's quite warm, and it was quite heavy work actually. I was transferring soil for my pot plants, which, I had to go down the bottom of the garden, fill up a plastic tub, bring it back. Well, fill it up. I didn't. I couldn't carry it when I filled it up, so I had to fill it up halfway. So it obviously meant more trips, but it's kind of fun, albeit rather knackering. And I'm going to go back to it after I made this video. But I thought I'd use my break time constructively. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, Book Time with Elvis, with me, Mark. And I'm here to talk about one of America's most controversial books, one of the most challenged and banned books in American history. Do you know to which book I am referring? I am referring, of course, to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which I read yesterday. I read it in under 24 hours, and what do I think of it? You're asking yourself probably. Well, I actually really enjoyed it. However, I realize it is problematic for some people, of course, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, its controversial nature and my own experience with it as a book. The most obvious thing that jumps out at people, or people criticize about it, is its liberal use of the N-word. Now, before I read it, I probably thought there was some overreaction until I actually Googled how many times the N-word is used in the book. And yes, I'm going to refer to it as the N-word for the purposes of this video. I don't feel comfortable saying it because I don't want to cause offense to anybody. So even in this context where I think it's legitimate if you should want to say it, because you are actually talking about the book, you can, but personally I prefer not to say it on this video, or generally I should say. But until I looked it up on Google and found out it's used over 200 times, which actually seemed quite a small amount considering to the amount of times I encountered it. But I don't have a problem with it being in this particular book, because I think in many ways it belongs in this particular book. Now, hear me out before you start, canceling me and flipping to the next video or something like that. Now, a lot of people think it should be removed. It shouldn't be. It should be edited or censored. I don't agree with that. I think the antebellum time that it's portraying needs to be shown for what it was, a time of bigotry, a time of suppression for African Americans. And I think if you remove this word that we attach so much importance to in terms of its power to cause offense, if you remove it, then you remove the reason for us not saying the word, perhaps, because then there's no evidence. If you keep going through books and doing it, there's no evidence of this word being used negatively. The only time you'll hear it is when African Americans refer to each other with that word in rap music and things like that. So it then becomes, I think, hard to justify why it's an offensive term today. I also think, unfortunately, it's a realistic thing to use such a word when this word was, as far as I believe, very much part of the vernacular of 19th century. I'm going to say even English-speaking countries, because it's certainly used in Britain as well during this period. Perhaps the underlying tones and the motivations for using it in an offensive way are perhaps somewhat different given the different experiences. And obviously Britain was involved, of course, heavily in the slave trade, although it wasn't so common to have chatteled slaves walking around England. So people's contact with them would have been much different to that of those living in America. So the word itself, yes, causes deep offense today. May well have caused, of course, deep offense to people back then as well. But seeing as it was so widely used, it's hard to give a realistic depiction of the time and the story that it talks about without using the word. And the story itself is something I do want to mention because I found it a really, if you can disassociate these words from the story, I found it a very engrossing story. It was very page turning. I enjoyed the dynamic and the relationship between Huckleberry Finn and Jim, who is, I'm going to use the term escaped slave. And if you read the book, you'll find out why probably I put that in air quotes. And the kind of what I think for the time is probably a very progressive relationship and friendship that develops between them. Definitely, Huckleberry Finn does have internal battles with regards to the fact that he can consider Jim someone's property one minute and consider him a good friend the next minute. So he's definitely got this kind of internal struggle within him as to how his own relationship with Jim should progress. I'm very tempted to read Percival Everett's James after reading this book, something that I wouldn't have done without reading this book. So I may well give that a try. Now, obviously, yes, the depiction of race in the book can be and is problematic to modern audiences, but again, the book was written in 1884. Not really that long after the emancipation of chattel slaves in the southern United States, and of course, way before the full ending of segregation in the southern United States in the early 1960s. So should you read it? I think you should. I think everybody should read it. I think especially every American should read it because it is a book, I think, very much that shows an important depiction of the Southern society at the time. I think that it's easy to see that Mark Twain has his sympathies on the racial issue, and of course I know this from his involvement years later in the exposure of the horrendous treatment of Africans in the Congo under King Leopold. You can see the book King Leopold's Ghost for that, which is a really enlightening book. And as I say, Mark Twain does come out on the right side of that particular argument, as does Joseph Conrad. He gets a lot of stick for his book, of course, In the Heart of Darkness. Again, a book I think is heavily misunderstood in terms of the message it's perhaps trying to convey. And of course, it's difficult to wrestle again the common vernacular use of the N-word with racist attitudes. Now, Huckleberry Finn is a racist. Whether that's deliberate or not from Huckleberry Finn's point of view, but he's grown up in that society, and it would be very hard push not to be, given the climate and stuff he's grown up in. In some ways, a similar thing could be said for the author Margaret Mitchell in Gone with the Wind, given that she grew up in the South in the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th to 20th century. Again, is going to be very much influenced by the society in which she grew up in as well. Now, that's not necessarily saying giving them a get out of jail free card. Now, of course, Huckleberry Finn didn't really exist, but Mark Twain did. So he grew up in a similar area, of course, to his main character. Other things that probably should be pointed out is I do believe that Twain's intentions are to make this humanizing portrayal, and I think he should be in some way applauded for being very progressive, especially for the times in which he grew up and of course in which he's writing as well. Now, charges of being patronizing and stereotypical are leveled at him. How, again, when the book is written, how much is he being stereotypical? How much is he setting the future stereotype? which is maybe something else that someone needs to look at perhaps before leveling those charges. There's always going to be the early works that are going to be the foundations for any stereotype that comes later. And I don't know, personally, I found a large part of the portrayal of Jim, yes, uncomfortable in the sense that he can be quite childlike, extremely superstitious, but he's also extremely loving, extremely generous, extremely kind, self-sacrificing individual, which again is not what one would expect from a racist author. So yeah, I think again we need to perhaps give him a bit of slack. But you may disagree with me, and that's why of course I invite you to give your comments down below. This is not an invitation to be, of course, rude or aggressive in things. It's just an invitation to dialogue. And perhaps there are probably, I've only just read this book. There are probably some of you who have read it a million times or have been taught it and know it far better than I do. And I'd love to hear your opinions on it. Other things perhaps is that there are elements of what could be considered irony or satire or even parody back when the book was written, which of course don't translate well to 21st century sensibilities, and again can cause misunderstandings and offence as well. Now, the novel is frequently challenged in American schools and libraries, and some districts have at various times, school districts in America have at various times restricted it or banned it due to the perceived racism within the book. Now, despite, of course, all the controversy that surrounds, I'll show it again, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, I think an argument can be made that the book is somewhat a powerful anti-racist novel written at a time where it was not, de jure, let's say, to do such a thing. So it does have definitely flawed aspects to it, but I think its general thrust is that of good, and it is very much critiquing the antebellum society, which it seems to me from reading it that Mark Twain doesn't have much truck with. Now, maybe that is born out of the fact that the novel was written after the defeat of the Confederacy, but there are plenty of authors, Margaret Mitchell one, who of course was much younger and born way after the defeat of the Confederacy, who still holds up a romantic candle to it. I don't think Twain does that at all. But of course, the Civil War hasn't taken place yet in the book, but in his life, he will have been impacted by that defeat. It does have complex moral themes, with Huckleberry Finn, of course, having to fight against his natural instinct to want to turn Jim in, and the fact that Jim is his friend. And I find those internal conflicts that take place throughout the book very interesting, as well as that evolving friendship between both Huck and Jim. And from what I've heard, it is a fairly realistic depiction of antebellum America, but it's not something I can actually speak on with much authority, not knowing too much about America at that time. So yeah, I did learn a few things from it. I did have to look things up. One of the things that really surprised me was the notion that a freed slave could be re-enslaved and sold at auction if they remained in a slave state long enough. I think he mentions 6 months in the book, but I don't know if it's Mississippi or Alabama. A freed slave could be re-enslaved and sold at auction if they spent 10 days in the state, and that's apparently true, and that I found to be extremely shocking. So, yeah, I would say if you haven't read it, I would recommend reading Tom Sawyer first. I think you can obviously read this one without reading Tom Sawyer, but I actually really like Tom Sawyer. Did I like it more than this? I don't know. Maybe I like this a little bit better. This seems a little bit more adult to me than Tom Sawyer did, probably because of the themes in it, despite the fact, of course, the main character is still a child, although, Yeah. And maybe I did like this a little bit better. I certainly don't remember Tom Sawyer being as problematic in terms of the use of what is now considered a racial slur. But I think I can understand people not wanting to read it because of the content and stuff that I mentioned. But again, I would reiterate that sometimes it is important for us to read things that we are uncomfortable with in order to understand situations that have arisen in the present and may, of course, arise again in the future. And I think Huckleberry Finn could be good for that. I mean, there's a wonderful part in the book where Huckleberry Finn's father, Pa Finn, rails against government, right? And it's something you see a lot today from some quarters of American society. The idea of too much government, the fact he gets done, I think, for not paying his taxes, that kind of thing, which I found very interesting because it felt like not much had changed necessarily between the writing of this book and Pa Finn's experiences and what some people perceive to be governmental injustices today. Now, again, not being American, I don't know too much about it, and forgive me if you see I've got slightly muddy hands. But I would still recommend it to anyone. I don't know necessarily if I would recommend it to too young children, as it once may have been recommended, but I think any child who has a basic grasp of the history of the Confederacy, the Southern states, and slavery in America, I think they could find it a very interesting read of that particular period by a wonderful storyteller. So there we have it. Those are my thoughts on one of America's most challenged and banned books, which, as I said, was read in a day, and a day well spent. So thank you ever so much for watching. Hope to see you all soon. Do take care. Bye bye for now.